Welcome to another Replenish, hope that sustains in the midst of adversity. This is a safe place where I invite special guests to share their insights and encouragements to replenish us on the journey of raising kids from hard places. So whether you're a foster parent, kinship, adoptive, safe family, this conversation is for you. My name is Tristan McGee. I am your host. I am an adoptive mom as well as a teacher and a TBRI practitioner. So before I introduce our guest today that we're going to have a conversation with, I just want to let you know that the chat is open. So feel free to comment, ask questions, check in with each other. This conversation and the chat room are for you. And just to let you know, at 5:30, David is going to log off. And anyone who wants to stick around for another half hour for the after party for just the parents, the foster adoptive parents, to kind of digest in what David talked to us about today, we'll be doing that as well. So just a little heads up there. All right. So today I have invited Dr. David Adams to join us for a conversation about attachment-based parenting for lying, stealing, and hoarding behavior. So David, before we get started, I just want to tell everybody some of the things that make you so amazing and why I invited you on today. All right, so Dr. David Adams is an adoptive parent of 2 children. He is the clinical director of Mere Clinics. As a child and adult psychologist, Dr. Adams is an expert of working with children and their families with trauma, behavior disorders, along with foster care and adoption-related issues. He also specializes in pediatric psychological assessment. He's a licensed professional clinical counselor, a licensed clinical psychologist, board certified in behavioral analysis, and a certified clinical trauma professional. He's super smart, obviously. In addition, he is a TBRI practitioner. That is trust-based relational intervention. Dr. Adams also is on faculty at National University and teaches classes on the science of human behavior and behavior analysis. He also is an expert trainer with Saddleback Foster Care Kinship Education as a sought-out speaker on topics of trauma and behavioral management. He enjoys sharing information of science as attachment, behavior, neuroscience, as related to the experiences he has with his own adoptive kiddos. So welcome, David.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm like so impressed just reading all that. I mean, we've been friends for years and years and years, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he is so smart.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So David, before we get, can I call you David?
Please do.
Thank you. Before we get started, let me just ask you, what started you on this journey of working with kids from foster adoption world?
Well, I will say what started my journey into my personal adoption world was I was actually working on my doctorate in clinical psychology, and I was working full time, and quite honestly had a lot of apathy in my own life. I was focused on my needs, and I ended up, after graduating, actually going through that process, thinking, you know, I need to kind of get out of my comfort zone a little bit and really draw near to people and needs in order to deal with my own apathy. And so I traveled actually to Vietnam to work in with an agency that I thought I was going to go and do some training and kind of change them. And so I went to Vietnam and I shared with them a little bit about child development and how to respond to behaviors and attachment. And I just fell in love with these kids. And one of these little kids, the youngest kid in one of the orphanages, started to call me daddy. And it just did something in my heart. And I thought, now as a single parent, I just really started to have a love for the orphan and wanted to make sure that all kids deserve families. And so when I left, one of the persons says, David, the big difference is going to be what happens when you go home. And as a result, I got back home and got plugged into orphan care ministry at my church at Saddleback, and went down to Mexico to try to get churches connected to orphanages. And through that process, learned that I really had a heart to adopt as well as a single parent. And I took the biggest risk that I've ever, the biggest, boldest adventure to say yes to two kids through that I adopted in the Orange County system. And I adopted Andrew and Michaela when they were 7 and 9, and of course learned the hard way, just like all of you foster adoptive moms and dads, the challenges out there. But that's a little bit of history. I will say apathy broke instantaneously for me as soon as I draw near to people, took my mind off of myself and my studies and what I was doing onto other people, that just stirred a compassion in me and a heart for the orphan. And now my mission, I have a 4-part mission statement, and one is to be a father to the fatherless. And I just recently have taken on a new foster child that I've got temporarily, a little 5-year-old. And so really, I respect all of you out there who are struggling out in the field and giving a labor of love, and many of you being hurt in the process, because I've been there myself, and it's a journey for sure.
Definitely. I love that story. And I love the fact that you started on this journey, not necessarily planning to adopt, but
No,
then now you do. And I just appreciate that so much in the line of work that you're doing, because it brings that just real life experience. And I think that that is something that foster adoptive parents really can trust, because so many people say things but they haven't really lived it, but you're like living this every single day. And then taking on another foster kid, like, my hat's off to you, and I'm just so thankful that you are part of this community.
thank you, Tristan.
So let's get into it, because I know time
Yeah.
goes quickly. So we're going to talk about lying, stealing, and hoarding, and these are some of the most common when we talk in foster and support groups and that kind of stuff. These behaviors are so common. And so I'd like to ask you, with all your neuroscience background and all that great stuff, I love that kind of stuff. I'm kind of a neuroscience nerd myself. I don't have any degrees, but I love to hear those answers. So can you explain to us a little bit and why it's so common with foster, adoptive, and just kids from hard places in general? Why is it so much more prominent?
Yes. Such a great question. And I've talked to hundreds of foster parents and adoptive parents, literally in my own workplace, and just in connecting with parent support groups and stuff. And the 3 areas that I hear are lying, stealing, and hoarding. Those are the ones that tend to be really common for kids from histories of neglect and histories of trauma. And I think a lot of this has to do with safety for a child. And one of the things that I've discovered is that a lot of our kids who come from a history of neglect, they have been taught basically not to necessarily trust certain adults. Not all of them, but some of them. And when I don't trust adults, I have to, in order to truly meet my needs, I have to take care of myself. My own son was a history of neglect, and lived in a garage and was out unsupervised, looking for milk for himself because he learned that he couldn't trust certain adults, and he has to take care of himself. So if I don't trust adults, then I'm going to perhaps take things, hoard things, lie in order to truly survive. So I think for many of our kids, it's a matter of survival, and it's a matter of control, because when I control, when I have things, I feel safe. And I know that when I have whether I take an item with me to bed, that it's mine. I feel attached to this item because it's mine. Or if I take food or take candy and have it and hoard it and see all the wrappers under the bed, again, those kinds of things are going to allow me to have choices to be independent because I can't trust you. And even though I may be in a safe environment now, my brain is telling me, you know what? It's not telling me yet that I'm safe, and I'm still not quite trusting you. And so I've got to fend for myself, and that's why attachment is the key, I think, to help kids' brains and bodies and minds and emotions feel safe.
Yeah, and I think that's so hard sometimes for us parents. Um, and I just love what you're saying, about how they've learned not to trust, and it's not necessarily a conscious thing
Mhm.
in them. And I even think that there's an aspect that they don't even know why or understand themselves. Like, right? I mean, is there some
Yeah,
kind of
yeah. And one of the things that we
compulsion, or not compulsion, but like lack of self, like what is that part?
Yeah, yeah.
How
I
does
was
that?
just thinking when you say that, and I've done this as a parent, and we all do it, but we say, "Why did you do that?"
Yeah,
And I think that's kind of funny because it's really not the best question. If you do, every time you get a response of what? I don't know,
yeah,
right? The question is used oftentimes for our own benefit, as a parent, but we never get any benefit out of answering it in that sense. I think it's really a statement disguised as a question in a sense. It's really an accusation, but the problem is it puts the child on the defensive, right?
right,
And that results in fear and dysregulation, which is exactly what we don't want for our kids, because then they're not in the prefrontal lobe, which is the thinking. We say, why did you do that? And they're like, oh, you know. So
and
I
it
don't think our kids
escalates.
always know. And I think one of the things that I love to say is you don't want, it's not going to work if either you are fired up or your child's fired up. And so you don't want to respond until the adrenaline is gone. And when we ask a child, why did you do that? Right? It
Right.
puts the child into dysregulation and fear, which will create a response out of survival, oftentimes not the one we want to see as parents.
Yeah, and I just love that response because that's something I've had to learn over, my journey of the last 10 years is sometimes it takes me, when we see this behavior in our son, sometimes it can take me a whole weekend, like 3 days, to even really get to the place where we can have a conversation, and that adrenaline doesn't immediately, like, that reactivity doesn't start, and so to really calm down that situation, it can take a long time for us to get to that. And I remember, me asking why before. And I think one of the things that us as parents, it's frightening behavior. We're not always told and trained ahead of time that this is the common behavior and why this happens and how to respond. And as a parent, it can be so frightening, and we can get so ahead of ourselves and caught up in our own fear and thinking, if I don't get a handle on this kid's behavior, who knows what's going to happen? They're going to get kicked out of school. They're going to end up
Uh,
stealing from a store. They're going to go to jail. They're going to get arrested. I mean, you know, how are they ever going to, get through life? Like, we get so far down into the future that we feel like if we don't handle this right now and figure it out, um, it's going to be hard. So I know parents have a part in this too.
yeah, I tell you what, Tristan, I've developed this type of internal struggle where within a split second of my son, and by the way, my kids have dealt with all of this within the first week of them living with me. Um, and so, but I've developed this internal struggle that the moment that it happens, I initially think of my son or daughter creating havoc in relationships, ending up on the streets in gangs, ending up in prison, getting fired from jobs because of their lying and their stealing behavior. And So my own fear of what I see makes me kind of get this over response that I've
Yeah.
learned, like, oh man, what did I do? I just really blew it here because I over exaggerated this one line because of my own fear. And in the same sense, this is what's going on with our kids, and they're responding with fear. So I think it's really a great point that you mentioned, Tristan, that we have to kind of, normalize the lie. In fact, um, when we think about lying and what happens for school age children, I mean, between the ages of I mean, in order for a child to learn how to tell the truth developmentally, they actually have to learn how to lie, and it's actually normal development for
Mm.
children to learn to not tell the truth at times. And by age 2 to 3 years of age, our kids will learn to break rules and tell stories, and between 3 to 5 years of age, sometimes we see them making make believe stories, and they want to tell these tall tales. And sometimes it just may be for fun. And by the time our children are school age, some of them get really good at lying, right? But I think this is part of the normal development that all of our kids go through, but especially kids with histories of trauma or neglect. So I have to remind myself when my son is just given the biggest lie, or my daughter, that hold on, this isn't going to mean that they're going to end up in prison. This is just one line. And it helps me to realize that it's normal for them to lie at times. And my role, this is very important. My role and your role as a parent is not to teach them to not lie. It's not to teach them not to hoard. It's not your role to teach them how to steal. Your role and our role is to love our kids. I mean, that's it, no matter what. So your job is to love them no matter what, even if they keep lying, even if they keep stealing and hoarding. And I think it's really, really important to realize that, because sometimes I come at it with being this police officer role where my job is to teach you not to lie, and I've missed the mark. No, my role is to love the child. And out of that attachment, then I'm going to help them figure out alternative solutions and things to do. And I think if I approach that way, I find that it just helps me, it helps my children, and I know it helps the children that I work with. And the parents that they work with, is to realize that your role is to love, okay, no matter what. And that's helpful for me as a parent, as a foster parent.
I totally agree. And but I know that there's people on this call probably freaking out right now going, what are you talking about? Because it is such a different mindset than raising, your biological kids, or what the world says, or anything, or pressures that you get from school, from other families who don't understand trauma. So when you say our job is to love our kids, can you just expound a little bit on how loving on them and that attachment
Yes,
builds the trust and a
yeah,
place where then we can build these other things on? Because I hear
right,
what you're saying. I hear what you're saying is, if we jump in right away with um I don't know, punishment, or the trying to figure out why, or trying to fix the behavior, that it exasperates it.
yeah.
That's what I've noticed, for one. So
So
how does connection
yeah, yeah.
build a place where, like, I just know people are like, what are you talking about? That's not our job, to teach them how to not lie
Yeah,
and
that's not our
steal.
primary job. So I think when we engage in our primary job to love our children, what we're going to find out is I
What do
address.
you mean by to love our children? Because some people think, I've raised a kid, about 8 years before I had my adoptive kid, right? And to love him was to teach him some of these things.
Yeah,
And he did steal, like you're saying, stealing line was part of growing up, but I was able to address it right away and teach him in that moment, which I know we can't always do with our other kids because of that adrenaline. They're so reactive. So when
right.
you say our job is to love them,
That's our primary job. Yeah,
what do you
because
mean that looks like? Because
yeah,
loving can also mean
Yeah.
teaching them the right things to do. So
Oh,
like,
sure. I'm going to give you guys some really specific strategies on how to do that.
love
But
it.
it's got to be in the context of love, right? So, and it's got to be in the context of an attachment. What we do as parents is oftentimes when we're addressing a behavior, we're trying to disarm fear.
Mhm.
And so when for a child to be able to learn and to listen to you, they can't be in the limbic system of their brain, which is where the flight or fight happens, and stress and everything. And if I come to them and show signs of disapproval in that moment, um, I've got to show signs of empathy and connection and love to get them out of that fear spots to where they can think and then say, okay, buddy, let's just talk about what we could have done differently. But the context is love, the context is connection, the context is attachment. And then in that attachment, I'm going to address the problem and figure out what they could have done differently and allow them to practice that and praise them when they do it the right way, of course. So it's not saying that we don't address the behavior because we have to, but the context of that is love, attachment, and connection. Yeah, great clarification there.
I love that. And I hear what you're saying, and I so appreciate you just expounding on that for us. So typically, we come with that punishment. That's kind of how we traditionally, how even our culture kind of handles that kind of behavior, especially lying and stealing. Um, Hoarding is kind of like a whole nother thing because I think that's a little bit more unique to this population. Um, but so why is it that traditional parenting methods, maybe grounding, whatever kind of like punitive
Yeah,
or punishment, why
sure.
does that not work with these kids?
Yeah.
And
Well,
why is it not good? What do you
yeah.
suggest instead?
This is really what the behavioral research shows is that punishment actually only teaches a child what not to do, right? It doesn't teach him what to do. And I think as parents, sometimes we become experts at finding the things that they're doing wrong, but we never really focus on teaching them what to do right. So we think if we tell them what not to do, that they'll automatically know what to do, but that's not always the case. And so a lot of times punishment assumes if you're going to put a child in timeout, that they can tolerate being away from the caregiver. And that actually, timeout is shown to be effective with kids who have attachment. But when you have a child who's not attached and you send them away as a punishment or take an item away from a consequence, they're just going to think that you're mean. And I can't tell you, I've seen this with my own kids where I've put on a consequence or maybe doing something, taking away video games, and my son going to scratch and paint, get a rock and put curse words on my car, spike my nails, whatever, as a kind of a response. You're mean, I'm going to be mean back to you. And so that's why punishment oftentimes causes this retribution effect where the child misinterprets that who's not attached and they just think you're mean. And so that's why we as parents want to do a better job. So we can say, don't stop running when they're around the pool, or we can say, hey bud, let's use your walking feet, and then they walk and you say, hey, that's awesome, I love it, that's great walking. And that's a much better approach, right? Because you're reinforcing what you want to see rather than stop yelling, stop running, I've told you 1,000 times. What we're doing now is we're showing disapproval for an unattached kid, and when they feel they are disapproved, it creates fear. It creates, other behaviors that go along with it. And so I think a lot of times we have to just kind of figure out, instead of telling a child what not to do, show them what to do and practice it, and practice that part.
I love that. It reminds me of I taught preschool for many, many years, and that's how um, we would approach it in preschool. You don't yell at the kids to, don't run in the hallway, but you exactly what you said, use your walking feet. And so I just love the idea of teaching them what to do and practicing that over and over because with this complex developmental trauma, these kids are all over the place developmentally. Like you were saying,
Mm.
you talked about lying and understanding reality that kind of forms between 2 and 5, and trust in that first year. And if they didn't get that healthy relationships in those first 5 years and even beyond, then developmentally they have not gotten a lot of these things. So when I hear you say that, and I think back on my preschool stuff and how we repeated things over and over, and that's the way they learned, that it makes sense to do that with our older kids, even
Yeah,
though they seem too old to have
yes.
us to have to do that.
Yeah. And I've actually seen some research that they say it says takes 400 repetitions to develop a synapse in the brain. What that means is 400 times of doing that behavior over and over again before it becomes automatic to
Wow.
where we expect them to do. And so we think if the child can do it once, then that means the child can do it twice and 3 times. Not always the case. We have to really, really do that. And I think that's why the redo is so important. It allows us as a parent to stay calm and say, hey, let's try that a different way, and let's practice that, and really focus on the positive. So if we're looking at hoarding behavior, um, what is the replacement behavior for hoarding is or stealing is learning to ask for something, right? So it's we want them to have food. We want to say yes, but we want to make sure that we give a lot of yeses in the piggy bank. So we want to really teach that child if they are hoarding and taking food, items, toys, whatever to them to bed, we just come to them and say, hey, bud, I see that you really want these toys, with you, or I see that you really want to eat these foods with you, and that's great. Let's see if we can make that happen, and let's practice this a different way. How about you ask, and then we can see if we can figure out a way for that to occur, and we can do as our parents try to do our best to allow that child to have access to a food or an item. For example, I also really encourage for hoarding behaviors, for example, to have um, a special drawer, um, or if a child hoards, we say, hey, let's go and take this food and put it in your cubby drawer here. Okay. And you can have it access to you at any time. And maybe you can pick one item to keep with you by your bed. So what we're doing is we're trying, instead of the idea of taking the food or taking the item or the thing and go, we say, why don't you say, hey, can I put this in my drawer so I can have access to it at any time? And we can give them nuts and fruits or apples, or we can give them certain foods that they can have unrestricted, or even a certain amount of treats. And once it's gone, they have to wait for the next week to get it. I really avoid candy and sugar whenever possible with my kids. But if your kid really wants, we want to make sure they have access to foods and how to get that in an appropriate manner.
Yeah, I think that's so wise. I mean, when my son first came to us, he had some hoarding tendencies with food. And I just, luckily, I have a nutrition background, and I just thought, you know what? I need to just let him, he'd eat like 5 or 6 eggs every day at once, just, and I had to just say, he's coming from a place of scarcity and in his history. And if I can just let him know that there is no longer that place of scarcity in this house, that there is, like you said, an abundance of food. And still to this day, we always have a big bowl of fruit out on the counter that he does not ask. He doesn't
Yeah,
have to ask.
yeah,
He can just take
that's
that. He knows it. And if he does ask, he knows I'm going to say yes. He'll eat 5 or 6 of those little oranges, and it's okay. And it's okay
yeah.
if he doesn't eat all of his dinner because he filled up on a banana first. Like, which doesn't happen, by the way. The kid can eat like no other. But I think that that can be hard for parents as
Yes.
well.
And I want to just speak to hoarding a moment, and maybe we could talk a little bit lying here in a moment. But hoarding and
Sure.
stealing is that it's very common for kids with neglect and trauma. Kids who have not had regular opportunities to have food will see food as safe and as survival, and it can actually be kind of an instinctual need. And in a sense, it's a good need because our bodies need food, but they've learned not to trust the adults, right? So hoarding food or item is kind of like a way to feel safe and secure. And my kids that came to me, they were hoarding foods because they were in a large items. I mean, even my son today will get random items like screwdrivers and tape measures and just find, what is this? And he has it under his pillow because, a lot of times they didn't really have items to themselves. And I asked, I just feel safe with the item. And so it brings security. So, I think even now with my own children, I would go to, I gave my daughter $5 to go into the store when we were driving to get a snack. I said, no sugar, no candy, but you can get some chips and this sort of thing. And I was pumping up gas, and I went to the cash register, and she had $20 of candy, sugar, all these ice cream bars, and it was literally about 15 items. She was thinking, maybe I can use this $5. And I said, it just kind of, when we go to a buffet, I mean, they put tons on the food. And so, I think there's an aspect to where we want to teach our kids to do this, but a couple of things. Make sure that you feed your child every 2 to 3 hours, because obviously, and be careful about using punishment to to take away food as a punishment. My own son went with a very well-meaning friend of ours who actually went out and they came back and unfortunately they were acting out, and the person had used ice cream and said, oh, you can't have the ice cream now because we talked about it. And my son came home so dysregulated. I mean, it had a meltdown that just lasted forever because for multiple reasons. And so I think there's an instinctual need to be careful about that. But so I encourage you to have storage box of belongings, a drawer in the kitchen, and really focus on asking. So, and give lots of yeses. So if my son takes food, and the stuff, and he's got like all of this stuff, I say, hey, bud, why don't we go ahead and take one bowl of cereal now? And after you eat this one, okay, you can ask me to have some more, and I'd be glad to have another one for you, And so then he'll eat that one, and then he'll feel good, and he won't need, but he'll pour a whole bunch in, at one time, and I'll say, hey, bud, let's do about half, and if you want some more afterwards, you can ask, and we can try to figure out a way for that to happen, so that he feels that it's kind of like a security for him, I think, and my daughter as well, So being able to really focus on doing that and say, that's a great job of asking. I love it. Let's do this. And it allows also our children to kind of learn how to accept a limit, when they know, okay, I can accept this limit because I know that I can have some more later, and rather than leaving all this extra to eat afterwards.
Such good advice and wisdom in that. And before we move to the lying and the stealing, with the hoarding, just because there's a lot of questions in the chat, like about the sweets, and having sweets in the house leads to the lying and stealing and the hoarding.
Yeah. Oh,
What's
wow.
some suggestions on handling sweets in the house?
Well, I tell you, I don't buy it. I just don't buy sweets. And I used to actually have ice cream, and I actually no longer buy ice cream because no matter what happened, they'd eat the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so what I do for ice cream, for example, is we'll go on a special treat to McDonald's or Baskin Robbins and have the one scoop of ice cream.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll allow my child to have candy. And I will tell you, I know in a sense, it kind of creates this greater desire for something when you can't have it. But I would much rather have that than be so dysregulated. My son, even when going to church groups and different kinds of things, will take the sodas and stuff and just, he'll come up and he'll just be wired, literally wired. And he jokes, he goes, I know I had too much, I just can't stop. And so we kind of talked to him about it, and I just kind of encourage him, okay, you're going to go here, you're going to have, opportunity to have, they may have 8 or 9 pizzas, but you maybe have 3 or 4 would probably be the best bet, and try to see if you can work on that. And then if you want some more, what you can do is you can say, hey, can I have some more take home with me? So with the sweets, I mean, what we've chosen to do is not have any in the home. I'm not a big sweet feeder. Every once in a while, I'll bake a cake or cookies, for my child. But And for candy, I just really try to limit it unless it's a special occasion, just because I see the way it affects my kids. And that may be kind of extreme. I don't know. So I would just encourage you guys to not have it in the home and purchase it for special occasions. So you don't even make it a temptation for your child. And you don't even, because if it's in the home, sure, they're going to take it. And if they're not allowed to have it, they're going to find it and they're going to lie about it. So it's going to, don't even create as an opportunity and don't have it in the home would be my honest suggestion. That's what we've done. Maybe that's pretty strict, but that's, I try to find ways for them to get access to the ice cream and occasional candy here or there. Yeah, but the
No,
sugar,
I
of course,
agree.
yeah.
That's kind of how we've handled it, and it honestly it creates less conflict, and then like you said, we don't say no. Like when he goes out to parties or different things, I'll say, sure, you can have one soda, and I know he's gonna have three, and I'm just like, whatever, I'm not gonna be that crazy about being on top of them, but when we're out. Um, and so I have that flexibility, and then I use it, like you said, to be able to, this is a time where we can connect. Like we can go out and get the yogurt.
Oh,
We
I love
can
that.
go out
That is so good.
and donut. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
that makes them want to be with you. You become a conditioned reinforcer, what we call behaviorally, is because you're pairing yourself with the things they like, and it means that they want to be with you. And I do that oftentimes with sodas, and I say, hey, I'll let you have a soda, but we're gonna go out together. And well, can you bring it to me? No, I want you to spend time with me. I want to come with me, and we'll go get it together. Because we don't keep soda in the house either.
yeah,
And so that's one of the things that we try to do is creates that opportunity. So thank you for mentioning that.
I love that. So let's move on quickly to, because our time is
Lying, yeah,
actually
I
ending.
know,
What are some strategies
yeah,
to handle lying and stealing?
yeah, yeah.
And if you can share in that too, any personal
Oh yes,
stories, just
yeah, yeah.
blend it all together for me.
Oh well, we'll go for it. So I've got a couple of suggestions for you guys, and we kind of talked about this. Um, so instead of interrogating your kids, what I'm going to say is avoid asking questions. So instead of saying, um, "Did you brush your teeth?" or "Did you bring your homework? Did you do your homework?" It gives them an opportunity and lots of practice. So what I would suggest is instead make a statement. Instead of saying, "Did you take the candy wrappers? I see the candy wrappers. Let's go ahead and clean them up now." Okay. So rather than just saying, "Oh, I didn't take it," and denying, I've had that. I know you guys have had that. The evidence is right there and they're still denying it. So don't give them a chance to tell you a story. So instead of saying, "Did you brush your teeth?" "Let me smell your breath. I see your breath stinks. Let's go ahead and brush. I'm going to count to 10. I'm going to brush with you. Let's see if we can race and see who can do it the fastest." Right? I haven't even given them an opportunity to say no, that they already brushed it. If they say, "I already did it," I'm not going to do anything. "Oh, well, let's go do it again. It still has little stinky bugs. Let's go do it again." And we're going to go do it again. And now after they've already brushed the teeth and the threat and the fear is gone, then I can process with them, and talk to them about it, but not in the moment, right? I'm gonna try to disarm fear. I'm not gonna give them an opportunity. Um, you know, I already did. Well, let's go do it one more time anyway, right? "Oh, yes, you did. I know. Look, the brush is dry and you did it." I've just created fear, right? So what I'm gonna do is just play the game in that moment. Say, "Let's go do it again." And then after they're done, then I'm gonna come back and say, "Hey, but I noticed that brush was a little dry." And I'm not going to say you lied to me. I say, "What could have you done instead?" You could have said, "Oh, can I have 5 more minutes before I do it? Or is it okay if, I finish this game?" And I said, "Let's practice it. And then I'll do a fun game with them and practice it. And we'll practice that over and over again. Not in the moment, but just through the time of what they could have done differently to get that same need met." So don't allow that. The second thing, extra processing time. This is so important. Okay.
Good.
So during the time, the way our brain works is the sensory input comes in through the thalamus, sends it to the hippocampus, limbic system, and what it's processing all of the sensory, but it sends an impulse, a message to the limbic system, which is quick, reactive. So I have a threat, boom, I respond. I'm not thinking. There's a message that goes to the prefrontal lobe, but it can't be working until the fear is disarmed. It's much slower. Have you ever had a time to say, go clean your room, and all of a sudden your child, no, I'm not going to do that. And we say, no, don't talk to me with that tone of voice. We've created a fear. What I do is I show empathy for the first 20 seconds. I don't care what they say. And you know what happens afterwards? Then they say, okay, I'll go do it. Okay.
Wow.
And then after it's gone, I'll come back and talk to them later about it. So give 20 seconds, because that's how long it takes for the prefrontal lobe. The moment you tell them not to do something, or the moment you tell them to do something, and they have this response, give them 20 seconds to process. Okay, give them the first. And you know what?
I love that, David.
Yeah.
Let me just say, I've never heard that before, that you give them 20
Yeah,
seconds.
give them 20 seconds and give them a little time to process, because what's happening is they're reactive. And when they're reacting, you show empathy, right?
Well, and not only can we count to 20, but we can breathe deep,
Yeah, it gives us time to
ourselves in
take
those
a
20
break.
seconds.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
And
So,
I know that's what we've done. I've learned with my kiddo is that his first reaction, I kind of just have to ignore.
yeah,
And if I ignore that he said that, no, I'm not going to unload the dishwasher, and I don't really touch it and go there with them, like within a minute, he's like over there unloading it. But
and
if I get on that reaction, then we've just ruined our whole night.
so what you're doing is you're slowing things down, and you're co-regulating, because we want to speed things up, right? When there's tension, and when we speed things up, we're only creating fear. So what we do is we slow things down, give time to the answer. And I say this sometimes. I say, hey, bud, I'm going to ask you a question. It's okay to say I don't know. We accept that. We give time to process. Allow 20 seconds for that prefrontal lobe. And so part of this, again, is setting the stage and doing priming ahead of time. So it's okay. Just take a breath. It's okay to say, I don't know. I'm going to ask you a question. Did you, I'm not saying to do this, but do you have more homework for you to do? And let's just slow down for a second. It's okay. I'm going to be here with you, that sort of thing. And what we're giving is some time to process, right? So slow down, allow the process. And then I know we're short on time. I'm going to give a few nuggets. Give lots of yeses in the piggy bank, right? So, in order for your child to learn to accept no, you've got to give a lot of yeses. They have to make sure that, think of your child as having a piggy bank of yeses, and you're not able to give that child the no, right, until they've got a lot of yeses in their piggy bank. That will actually reduce your child's need to lie. And behaviorally, we say it creates an abolishing operation. In other words, when we're giving them a lot of yeses, okay, it reduces the chances that they're going to need to lie. And so one little technique that I use, and I just used it yesterday with my son, I said, hey, if I say no, are you going to stay calm? Oh, yes. And I said, okay, I'm going to say yes, right? Yes, you got it. And I'll do that over and over again. And then pretty soon I say, hey, if I say no, are you going to stay calm? And I'm going to say, you asked if you could go ahead and have the ice cream. We're going to have that after dinner. Okay, so we can't have it now. We're going to have it after dinner. Okay, so we're going to eat first and have it dinner. Does that sound good? Okay. Because they already know that I've set it up. And I've done this approach. I've talked to literally dozens of families, and they come back and say, Dr. Adams, that was brilliant. That helps so well, because it sets the stage where they realize they have yeses in the piggy bank, right?
So what was that statement? If I say yes, are you going to?
Are you going to stay calm? Are you going to have a calm body? If I say no, are you going to have a calm body? So I'm going to say, the child may happen say, hey, can you go get me a glass of water? Hey, bud, if I say no and you can get it yourself, are you going to stay calm? Yes, Dad. Okay, I'm going to do that for you. I want to. Here's your glass of water, right? And then do that 4 or 5 times. Dad, can I have a glass of water? I say no, so if I say no, you stay calm. But this is what I actually did is I'm going to get that for you. I'd love to, but I'm working on something. I have to wait about 15 minutes for that, and I'll get it to you then. I've just put a little delay in there, and then sometimes I just say, oh, I'll go get it, right? And then sometimes they say, okay, and then I'll go get it 15 minutes later, and then pretty soon but I want you to get it this time. I'm kind of working on some things. I would love to get it, but let's try to get it yourself this time, right? And by setting that little stage, it sometimes can help as well. Um,
I
as
love
well.
that. And you're piggybacking on the, no pun intended with the piggy bank thing, but that's what you're doing. You're
Yeah,
piggybacking on the
yeah,
yeses,
yeah. You're making
and
sure
you're
you get
doing
them
a lot
all.
of proactive teaching. It's like
Yeah.
so great.
And one other thing I want to say, and we'll wrap up on this, and talk a little bit about stealing, is sometimes I think we need to lower expectations that the
Mm.
child should never lie. Because when I do that, I'm going to overreact, right? And just realize the one lie isn't going to create um, a liar. We want to avoid labeling our children, saying my child's a compulsive liar, because then we develop a schema and we say, see, this proves they're a compulsive liar. See, this proves. And we can say, you know what, my child's still learning how to tell the truth. He's working through these, a work in progress. Um, and so I think that sometimes helps us um, to manage it ourselves and normalize that experience. I know you asked about stealing, and I know our time's out. I want to
No,
tell
no,
you
no. We got,
guys.
well, we're gonna go just a little 5 more minutes because we
Oh,
started so late.
okay.
So go ahead and do your the next one. And I just want to say about the lowering the expectations. I wrote it down. I write down a lot every time these are on because I get so much out of them. How you said like my child is still learning. I
Yeah.
just think that's a great little phrase to
Yeah. And I
say.
think that's a good reminder that, the prefrontal lobe continues to develop until age 25. Okay. So for a child with ADHD, they may be 60% delayed in the prefrontal lobe. But good news, that's why car insurance is a lot higher for a 24-year-old than a 25-year-old. So the good news is that your 16-year-old, your 4-year-old, your 9-year-old, your 17-year-old is still developing. Their brain is still working. They still have time to learn. And what they do as a 15-year-old, when they go to the store and steal the candy and put it into their thing, and they did the week before, they took the $20 out of my wallet and denied it, even though I confronted them with the evidence, would cause a lot of concern and fear for me. But when I can remember that this is an isolated situation, they're still learning how to get their needs met. It allows me as a parent to approach this and to teach them how to get that money in a different way. I see you really wanted it. Maybe you could ask, we can figure out some things for you to do around the house to get the extra money. And maybe we can do some extra chores. Maybe we can figure out, let's see if we can make that work for you. And I think that is something that you want to try to do with your kiddos.
I always tell my kid, like in those situations too, is saying like exactly what we're talking about, saying yeses, as I say, like I want to say yes to you, even if you think I might say no, like I want to work with you as a team and let's figure out together. Like we can
Mm,
work together and figure out how to make that happen because I
yes,
want you to have those things that you want and need. And like you said, there's times if we do that enough, there's times where we can say no and not have such a crazy situation.
right, right.
Okay, love it. Okay, so where are we at? Strategies for stealing.
Yeah. So, and these kind of go hand in hand with hoarding. I think sometimes they can create a similar type. I mean, I've dealt with this a lot. To this day, I have to mark my money in my wallet. I shield my credit card and stuff from my own kids, and because I still have these issues where my children, especially my son, will take things from me and purchase things on Amazon. And I have the passwords so that he can't do that. So I have to be very cautious on that and instructional. But the main thing, I mean, within the first couple of weeks, I got my son. We went into Home Depot. He was wrapped up in a towel or blanket, because he was cold and just sensory seeking, and he had gotten something small or something and stuffed it in his and walked out. And I was just naive, I was like, when I found out, I was like, oh my gosh, he stole, oh my gosh, he's gonna be a thief, and what have I got myself into? And then I saw it a couple times. And what I always do in this situation from a reactive strategy and a proactive strategy. I think the most important thing is the teaching is in the preactive, right? Proactive. The response, I just took him in back and say, hey, let's go back and have you talk and show that you took this. And every time we go and just say, hey, my son, he's he still sometimes struggles. He's learning to ask for things and sees that he took it and but I'll have him apologize and say that and kind of they're always appreciative. So I just allow him to have a natural consequence for that of going back. And then proactively, we come back to kind of the same thing. We want to model honesty by doing that. Several weeks ago, went to the pump at the gas, and actually this was, gosh, it was several months ago, not several weeks ago, and the money was already in there. I guess someone had gone in there, and I just got free gas, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's free gas. And my son's like, score, go. I like, no, we're going to go the right thing, and we're going to go model. And so when you model it as a parent, how to not take things without permission. A lot of times, just this happened 2 days ago. We left something at the pool, and there was some goggles on the pool, and say, look, it's there, let's take it. I was like, you know what? I know it's not belonging, but remember back when we lost our shoes and we came back and they still were there? Let's keep them here for a few days and see if someone else comes back. And so I'm using these natural opportunities proactively to try to teach him not to take things, right, that don't belong, teaching him how to ask. And when I see something that he steals, I say, okay, my son, my daughter has a need for this. Let's see if we can figure out a way for him to get it the honest way and model that, teach him that, teach him how to ask for it and do it. So just recently, my son was really upset at me, right? And as a result, he went on to Amazon and somehow was able to get on and ordered a hoodie, right? And that wasn't that I didn't find appropriate with what it was, and he did it, and I caught it on there, and I was able to cancel it on time because of the things. But I realized he has a need for this. I said, you know what? I know you really want this, and is that something that you really want? And I tell him a story. I remember back when I was a kid, I really wanted this. And I tell a story with him so I can try to identify with the fact that I know how it is, but this is what happened to me. And so sometimes putting a story to it and empathizes with that connection. So you realize that he needs that and said, let's see if we can make a way, some other way for you to figure out to get this. Okay. And what do you think are some options? And then I'll put it back on him. Well, maybe I could do some extra work around the house, or maybe I could be willing to do this. And then I'll try to figure out a way for him to come up with that solution, thinking for himself, right? And figuring out a way to get access to that. So again, we're creating that opportunity for him to get it in some other way, right?
I love that. I love that. Okay, so before we wrap it up, I have one last question. I feel like I could go on for another hour with you about this stuff, but so what about the stuff that just keeps appearing at the house, like, and you can't keep track of it, and it's looted goods from people, places, things, like you were saying, goggles, who knows where. What do you do about that? I hear people talk about that a lot. We've experienced it where you literally cannot figure it out, and you'd have to be on them all the time.
Honestly, I think any reactive approach isn't going to work. And the moment we try to come into a punishment standpoint and do that, I think what we've got to do is really focus on helping him or her take ownership when we can, if we don't know where it came from, right? What I usually do is confiscate the item and figure out a way for him to get access to that item some other way or some other manner. And obviously, if I see that it's someone belonged to someone else, and I say, oh, this looked like your friends, or what do you think we could do? And or maybe I should go back and take it over here. Or he came up with, one time, my son came up with some extra money, and he told me that he got it from a friend. And I knew that wasn't the case, and I knew it came from my wallet. And so, what I ended up doing was saying, you know what, buddy, I'm going to have to take it back. Okay. I know you want this. That makes sense. And we're going to figure out a way for you to get something. What do you want for it? And I kind of, again, using the proactive strategies. I think the more we can focus on the replacement behavior, focusing on asking and doing these things, I don't think punishing a child in that case is going to. Let me say one other thing. When you punish a child for lying, okay, the ones that are the best liars are the parents that are most strict. I would say, because it gives them more of an opportunity. So I think it's good to be strict. You want to have expectations, right? But the more strict we are, the more chances that that child is going to want to lie, right? So it's kind of a catch-22 in that process. And I think it's good. I mean, to be strict, you've got to. But when we do so, it kind of creates more of an opportunity for them to want greater need. And so we've got to figure out how to give them those opportunities to get those needs met. And the moment we say, usually I try the natural consequence of not allowing them to have the item, because if it's functional for them and they allow it to keep the item, then they've learned that I get that need met. But if they realize that they can't keep it, but they can get it through some other means, and we're going to practice them asking over and over for this, in order for them to get it, or earn it another way, then what we're doing is we're modeling behavior we want to see. And over time, I think you'll see the stealing decrease. And you don't even have to focus on taking away the cell phone for a month, or putting them, in timeout, or scolding them or lecturing them or that sort of thing, because you're focused so much on teaching that replacement behavior.
Great, 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 David. I love it. And for anybody who wants to stay for the after party, we can even dive into some more of this stuff together. But I want to just ask you the 3 questions I ask everybody as we wrap up today. And I just really appreciate you sharing your insights and your wisdom with us.
Thank you. Well, I think my greatest joy was.
Wait, I didn't even ask it.
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me, and so I.
You're blowing my secret. Just kidding. David, what brings you joy?
Wow, what a great question. So I think my greatest joy that I have had, well, there's a couple that I would say, but one of my greatest joys is the very first time my kids called me daddy. Oh. And that took some time when they did. My other great joy that I have with my own kids is just the one-on-one time I have before bedtime with them, snuggling in bed with them, talking and connecting with my kids. And so glad that my kids are very affectionate and loving, even as a 13 and 11-year-old. And no better time than the time that I have to snuggle and talk to them about their days at the end of the day.
Oh, you're so lucky. I don't get the snuggles anymore. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. If you could say one thing to your younger self when you first started this adoption journey, what would it be?
Well, I think the big thing I struggled with at first was feeling judged, especially when I went to the store and my kids were running around, jumping in the clothes ring, running around, jumping in the refrigerator at the thing, throwing things off, thinking, why don't you just, what are you doing? Just discipline the child. And so I'd say, relax, don't blame yourself for this. It's going to take some time, right? And be willing to accept help from the people who are offering you help. So I think those 2 things I would tell myself and remind myself to, there's going to be a lot of people who may have their opinions on what you need to be doing. Listen to them, learn from them, but you don't have to take it so at heart. Just realize that there's some people who may not understand. They're well-intentioned, but they may not understand, and you're doing the right thing by, what you're doing. And when you make mistakes, learn from it, apologize, and move forward.
I love that. Such great advice that we can all use today, even got to have a thick skin, right? Mm. So what foster adoption myth would you like to just blow up right now?
Well, I kind of came into this world pretty equipped educationally, right? And I thought, oh man, I've got this nailed. And I kind of thought that if I just love on my kids, right, they're going to naturally and immediately trust me, and they're going to accept my love for them. And it's just love. If I just love on them, that's it, right? But realize that no, it takes time, and it's love is. I talked about this. Your role is to love, right? But that love in itself is going to take some time to build attachment, and it's not just love. I mean, you've got to love and keep on loving, and you're going to be coming into some obstacles, and it's not going to be easy, and they're not going to always accept you. Both of my kids, from the day one when I picked them up, they they were throwing, we had all the cars and toys, they were throwing toys in the front seat. They told me to go home. If I loved them, I would send them back to their other placement. My daughter had gotten lipstick and put it all over her face and all over the back, and had to stop and pull over a few times. From the moment one, I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to love these kids, and all that's, they're going to trust me and accept. It took a long time. It took some time before, when I said the first thing that love is daddy, it took some time for that to happen, right? Before they realize that attachment does take time. With our kids, with their trauma histories, they're not going to just trust you, and realize it's a process. It's in a journey for it to occur.
Definitely. I love that. And I love that I get to see parts of your journey up close and personal. And I just love your kids. And I think you're just a great dad. And you just have offered so much to our community. So thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
Yes, glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
All right, so Max is going to put up David's email in the chat if you want to get a hold of him for whatever, if you want to need to contact him. And also, there's always, if you want to watch a replay of this, you can go to our private Facebook group that is Safe, Precious, and Heard, and you will be able to see this on replay. Yeah, and that's about it for today. So thank you, David, for joining our conversation. We appreciate your time and value your contribution. And thank you all to have joined today's Replenish. We hope that you do feel replenished and that this will sustain you for the time being. And please feel free to stay for the after party. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Have fun. All right, everybody. So if you're going to stay on, David, you can go ahead and log off if you want, or you can stay for the after party, whatever you want. So if you're going to stay for the after party, we just ask that this be for a time for foster, adoptive, kinship parents. And feel free to unmute. And Max is going to stop recording.